At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. Hey folks, this is the Phillies Talk Podcast. I'm Corey Seidman, and do not adjust your screen if you're watching on YouTube. This is the return of Ricky Bottalico, the new/old/new again Phillies Talk co-host. Ricky, welcome back. Do you remember how to do this?
I'm back. I think I do. I think I'll be all right with this, I think.
Well, I wish, we were here under better circumstances, but the Phillies are 0-4, first 0-4 start since 2016. We were just talking a little bit earlier just about how beyond the record, a lot of worrisome signs. The pitching depth already a concern. I guess coming out of spring training, there was the thought that this patchwork rotation could work, but you're already seeing the ripple effects on the bullpen. The fact that you have 2 of your projected 5 starters down, you have to bring Matt Strahm from the bullpen to the rotation. We've seen numerous Phillies relievers struggle. What have you seen from a pitching perspective, and what's your level of concern 4 games in?
Well, I don't, you know what my biggest issue is? I wonder how stretched out these starters were in spring training. I mean, I think we saw that from Aaron Nola. He got tired really early in the game. I thought he was flat the whole time. I know a lot of people will say, well, he pitched a couple good innings. I thought that game 1, Aaron Nola, 10-pitch at bat by Marcus Semien to start the game. I think that was like that was almost a telltale sign of where Aaron Nola was that day. How many times do you really see him go 10 pitches on anybody? I mean, it's kind of one of those things where he probably wasn't as sharp as he wanted to be. And then as that game went on, I think that first inning, 20-plus pitches in that first inning kind of came back to haunt him a little bit. And we know he gets a runner on base, all things fall apart from there. And it did. Everything that could have gone wrong in that game went wrong. I think Wheeler – CB Buckner stinks. I mean, I think he was a little bit of an issue in that game, but when you look at the whole picture, you've had one starting pitcher really look good, and that was Bailey Falter, probably the last guy that you thought was going to go out there and throw the ball extremely well and get deeper into a game than the other guys. But you know what? The bullpen has not looked good. Connor Brogdon, I mean, he has not looked good at all. We saw this from him last year, though, so I have a belief that he could get out of it. Gregory Soto's all over the joint. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but, I mean, we know what his track record has been, and it's been about can he throw strikes for long periods of time, and he hasn't really shown that as of yet. And, yeah, the bullpen's going to be taxed. If these guys can't start getting deeper into games immediately, this bullpen's going to get beat up quick.
Well, you look at, Game 2 at Yankee Stadium, we're sitting here recording this Tuesday afternoon. Matt Strahm is making his first start with the Phillies. The Phillies signed Matt Strahm in the offseason. It was one of their high-leverage reliever signings, 2 years, $15 million. He's thrust into the starting rotation because of the injuries to Ranger Suarez, to Andrew Painter, to Christopher Sanchez, who was another depth piece there. So Strahm hasn't made a real start since 2019. He did make maybe 16 or so starts that year with the Padres, but the Phillies are not asking for more than 65 pitches from Strahm in this game, which means you're going to need the bullpen for 4 or 5 innings. They're somewhat rested coming off of last night, mainly because Andrew Vasquez was able to give them 2 1/3 innings, which you can speak to as a former reliever. In a game where you're losing 8-1, there's major value in having a guy mop up and be able to save the rest of the bullpen for a game like tonight when they're going to be needed.
Yeah, and I thought Vasquez threw the ball well. I mean, he shows different looks, too. I think that's big, and I think that's going to be a key as the season goes on. But, yeah, I will tell you this much. Being a closer, a setup guy, to have a guy that can go in there and eat up some innings in a game like that, it's almost like a relief. I mean, granted, we used to pitch with 5 or 6 relievers. Now there's more like 10 out there in the bullpen, so it's a little bit different, and you should really never get caught shorthanded out there. But anytime a guy could pick up the rest of the bullpen trust me, that does not go unnoticed. That by a bullpen guy, you look at that guy, you pat him on the back and say, way to pick it up, because you know what? If you keep having to go to those setup guys and those late inning guys in those type of games, that's where you run into a lot of trouble. Kimbrel's rested. Sir Anthony pitched. Sir Anthony actually looked pretty good last night. I will say that much. So maybe he straightened himself out. Alvarado is Alvarado. So you have your back end, but the Phillies have to start getting leads for these guys to be comfortable. We haven't seen that at all. I mean, their last lead was the 4th inning in Texas on opening day.
Yeah, they've had a lot of base runners. They just haven't been able to come up with big hits. The Phillies, the last 2 games, 20 hits, just 2 runs. They've gone 3 for 18 with runners in scoring position. I think they've stranded 19 runners in those 2 games. You have Alec Boehm, who's hitting everything right now, singles, doubles. Trey Turner's off to a hot start offensively. Brandon Marsh had the rough game on the base paths and in the field Monday night, but he's produced so far offensively. But the Phillies are just not coming up with big hits. They also just have 1 home run. They had a homer on opening day and none since. They've allowed 8 home runs. So offensively, there's as much blame as there is in the pitching staff right now.
Well, you're seeing the typical Kyle Schwarber. Really, you don't see much of him early on in the season. June is his month, as we all know. And that's a little bit of a problem right now. Without Hoskins in the lineup, without Harper in the lineup, you're taking out a lot of run production. I know, Derek Hall's got to pick it up. Alec Boehm has really picked it up. I guess if look at the guys that are picking it up right now, it's not necessarily the superheroes. It's the guys that are up and coming and the guys that are starting to show themselves and become better ball players. But you need those guys, the Schwarbers. You need Real Muto, and we saw him last year. Same type of thing. If you think back to last year, Real Muto was really struggling up until the point where I believe he had to go to Toronto and he didn't go. That was last year, right? Yeah. And he got those 3 days off, came back, and he was hitting like gangbusters after that. This isn't the time and the place where anybody really needs some rest. So, I mean, there's a major concern in the middle of that lineup right now, and not hitting the ball out of the ballpark. I understand home runs will come and go, but this team kind of lives by that. If they don't hit home runs, they're probably not going to score a ton of runs. You alluded to 2 for 10 last night with runners in scoring position. A lot of times you'll look at the box score and say, well, that was a big problem. Well, if you look on the other ledger, you look at the Yankees, they were 4 for 13 with runners in scoring position. So both teams left a lot to be desired offensively last night. Yankees are just a stronger team right now, and they're playing with a lot more confidence. Until this team could start playing with confidence, and it takes 1 game. I mean, they might go out there and get Armand tonight for 5 runs in 3 innings, and then all of a sudden they could be feeling a lot better about themselves, let alone us, because obviously we're watching these games and we're saying this is non-competitive. These guys have got to pick it up a notch.
Yeah, whether it's like an 8-2 game or a close game, the Phillies need this first win just to remember what it feels like and to get that confidence back. Talking about the impact of Rhys Hoskins, the loss of Rhys Hoskins, I've just been thinking about this over the last week that, it goes beyond just the fact that you don't have Hoskins' bat in the lineup. It also changes the rest of the lineup, especially against left-handed pitchers, because last night, for example, Nestor Cortez, a lefty, starts for the Yankees. Rob Thompson started 4 left-handed hitters against a left-handed starting pitcher, which is not his preference. It wasn't Joe Girardi's preference before him. They like to split up lefties and righties. They don't like to have too many lefties in against a lefty starter. But right now they don't have many options because Derek Hall has to play first base. You have Edmundo Sosa, who is needed as a starting player, especially against left-handed pitching, whether it's at third base to allow Alec Boehm to play first, whether it's at second to give Bryson Stott a day off. Now Josh Harrison is dinged up with his right ankle sprain. He came out of the lineup. It just makes everybody else so much more important. The Jake Cave, Derek Hall, Edmundo Sosa. The Phillies are now putting more stock and riding on those guys more than they probably expected in 2023.
Yeah, you know what? Derek Hall, 1 for 12 last year against lefties, 7 strikeouts. I mean, those numbers are absolutely terrible. I think he's one of those. Him and I think Bryson Stott and Marsh, I think, should all get opportunities against left-handed pitching. I know it sounds a little abnormal, but are you trying? You brought up the bench. You brought up the right-handers that are going into these games. Are those guys the answers? Like I look at Pache, and he's not an answer to me. He's not an answer at all to me right now. And you have to wonder, who is better? Is it better to have Brandon Marsh in the game against the lefty than having Marte in a game who has shown really no signs of life as of yet? So I look at it this way. These guys are given opportunities right now, especially Marsh and Hall. They're going to be given opportunities to face some lefties. As a matter of fact, late in the game of the 2-1 game against the Rangers, Derek Hall hit against a lefty late in the ball game. So
Will Smith,
yeah, it was Will Smith. And the thing there is this Rob Thompson giving him an opportunity to say, hey, this is your job to lose right now. Let's see if you can't put up some numbers. So I look at it as a challenge for some of these guys, some of these left-handers in the lineup. Because when you think about it, right-handers are facing righties all the time. I mean, how many times do you see a right-hander swapped out for a lefty? Not a ton. And especially if they're a good player. I just think you have to learn to hit both sides if you're going to be how do I put an everyday type player in the big leagues. If you're only hitting right-handers, you're going to see a lot of bench time.
Well, Bryson Stott is one lefty who has been able to handle lefties so far in his major league career. He's actually been far better against left-handed pitching. I think after last night, he comes away hitting .284 against lefties in like 120 plate appearances with an OPS just under 800. Marsh, Hall, they have not hit lefties as much, although Hall did have a single last night off of a lefty. And they both guys had better at-bats against same-handed pitching in spring training, which gave the Phillies some confidence. As you mentioned, Hall comes up the other night, pinch hits with 2 outs in the ninth against Will Smith. That in itself shows you the lack of confidence the Phillies already have in Christian Pache, who feel that they need to give him a little more time with Kevin Long, the hitting coach, before he comes, because he came up in big spots in that game on Sunday Night Baseball. Pache's first 3 at-bats, 2 men aboard in each of the first 3 at-bats, and he ended the inning each time with a double
for 3, I believe, with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, it was rough. But, I guess one bit of promising news right now is that Rob Thompson said yesterday that Ranger Suarez came away from his bullpen session on Sunday feeling great, and he's going to throw another one Wednesday. From there, the Phillies will figure out what happens. He's probably going to need at least one minor league rehab start, you would think. Maybe not. I mean, the Phillies might have him come up as like a 3-inning guy for his first start, but he hasn't pitched in a game setting since March 8th at this point, which was an exhibition game for Team Venezuela in the World Baseball Classic. So you'd figure he would need at least one tune-up outing before he comes up. But that would be a godsend for the rotation right now, because it would allow you to put Matt Strahm back in the bullpen, and it gives you one more reliable starter, a guy who you'd hope by, maybe mid-May is back to himself, back to being able to give you 6 innings.
Yeah, I think being cautious is a little better on this one. I would definitely send him down for a start or 2 down in the minor leagues just to kind of elongate him, get him some more pitches under his belt, get him comfortable on the mound. March 8th, I mean, you're talking about a month. He hasn't stepped on the mound in a live game. That's something you really don't want. I think with Ranger, be a little cautious with him. I mean, he's given you everything he's had the last couple of years, and it's been really good from him. So let's get him back at 100% and then move on from there. You desperately need him. But, I mean, the bottom line is you don't want him to come back and re-injure himself because he's, trying to do too much out there on a major league field. I think you give him a couple outings down in the minor leagues. I think that would just help everybody out, not just the Phillies, but Ranger in general.
All right, so let me ask you, Ricky, the 0-4 start, some people think it means nothing. Some people think it means something. I would say 2 years ago, the Braves started 0-4 and then won the World Series. The Phillies swept the Braves twice in the opening series the last few years, and both times the Braves went on to win like 100 games. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily like a sign of doom for a team, but the Phillies are going to have to avoid digging themselves too big of a hole as they wait for Bryce Harper's return.
Yeah.
It's going to be a totally different team when Harper gets back, whether that's June 1st, mid-June, whatever, if it's a little later, a little earlier. But you have to avoid digging too big of a hole here. You look at going into Game 2 at Yankee Stadium, you have Matt Strahm on the mound, followed by a lot of bullpen. Game 3 Wednesday, you draw Garrett Cole. Anything can happen.
Against Aaron, and we don't know what Aaron's going to bring to the table.
Right. So, I mean, there's the possibility that this record could be pretty ugly by the time the Phillies get home, unless they pick up these 2 wins to salvage, the first road trip of the season. But what's your level of concern overall in this 0-4 start?
I think the concern is how they're losing. It's not just one thing. We've seen miscommunications in the field. We saw it the other day with Turner and Harrison out in short left field. We saw some miscommunication. We saw Marsh misplay a ball last night that could have been a huge play in that game. I know people will look at it, well, they gave up 8 runs and they lost 8-1. But that's not the whole point. You start off poorly and things kind of snowball on you, which is exactly what happened to Taijuan Walker yesterday. And in my opinion, he catches that ball. That could have been a 1-2-3 inning, and all of a sudden everything's great, and the Phillies feel a little bit more confident about themselves. it almost seems to me like they're waiting for something bad to happen right now, because that's what happens when you hit these little losing streaks. You have that type of thought process. Oh, what's going to happen now? Who's going to make the next bad pitch? Who's going to go up there and leave men in scoring position? You have to think a little bit more positive. I think tonight could be a night where they could get back on track. Herman's one of those guys that I think the Phillies could get a good look at and see the ball well against him. And I think playing at Yankee Stadium, some of those left-handed hitters, you get a ball in the inner half, you turn on it, maybe a home run or two in this game could really turn things around offensively for them. They weren't bad in their first couple of games offensively. I mean, they scored 7 and what was the other one? 6, 11 to 3 or 5.
Yeah, it was 7-3-1-1. So
yeah, so I mean, it's just one of those things where you got to get that offense on track. Once you get them on track and them going in the right direction, I think the pitching's going to fall into place. It might take a little bit longer than we think, but like in my opinion right now, I'm a little disappointed. I guess that would be the best word that I could throw out there. I'm disappointed in the way they came out, because I thought they would come out with a lot more fire. It seems as though they're just kind of sitting back, and you can't do that in baseball. You got to be the aggressor. They haven't been the aggressor.
Well, a big part of that is that they did not make it out of spring training healthy. The injuries to Hoskins, Suarez, and Painter, those were huge injuries. You're not talking about the back of the roster. You're talking about, maybe 3 of the top 10 most important players on the roster going into a season. What did you think of Taijuan Walker on Monday night? He did have the 33-pitch first inning, and the Brandon Marsh play did not help him. He also walked 3 batters in that first inning. He said later in the night that he tried to get too cute, but he was pleased with how he responded after that. He just gave up, I think he gave up a solo homer after that. That was the only run that was charged at his ledger until Junior Marte imploded when he relieved him. But Walker's fastball was back up to like 94 to 96 miles per hour, which was a good sign, because his final spring start, it was like 88, 89.
I thought he threw the ball fairly well. You take away that first inning, I thought he threw the ball extremely well. And he's right, because it looked like he was almost aiming the ball to the outside parts of the plate. And with his movement, everything kind of falls off the plate, and that splitter goes down out of the zone. So I think the one thing I was just talking about, challenging and being the aggressor, I think he kind of sat back and wasn't being the aggressor. He was trying to make them go after everything that he was throwing up at the plate. You can't do that. The Yankees are a good hitting team, especially 1 through 5. They could hit the baseball. They could hit the baseball out of the ballpark. And if you're not challenging guys on both sides of the plate, you're going to be in for a long run, especially giving Yankees free passes. Those 3 walks in the first inning absolutely destroyed Taijuan Walker in that game. And I will tell you this much, his comments after the game I thought were on point. He was right on point. And maybe he learns from this. Maybe it's one of those games where it was a new team. He just felt like he had to throw up 0 after 0 after 0. And when things fell apart in the first, maybe his mindset started speeding up on him and he couldn't slow it down. And what happens there? Well, you can't get the ball in the zone. You're not concentrating on your pitches. You're trying to stay away from the barrels. I mean, sometimes you just got to look at your spot and say, I'm going to throw it right there and see what happens.
Domingo Germán, the Phillies' opponent in this game Tuesday night, he is the kind of pitcher that you can jump on. Like it would not be foreign territory for him to allow 4 runs in the first inning, and that's exactly what the Phillies need. To your point about building a lead and just being able to maintain it throughout a game. One other guy I wanted to bring up is Nick Castellanos. A big topic this spring was that Castellanos talked about how he wanted to be more selective at the plate. Last season, he had a lot of trouble laying off of low and away breaking balls in particular. He chased one of the highest chase rates in all of baseball, and he had probably his worst offensive season since the first couple of years of his career because of it. So he made it a point of emphasis in spring training to see a lot of pitches and to be more selective. Yet here we are the first week of the season. He's in the cleanup spot on an everyday basis. He's like the most important run producer without Harper and Hoskins now. So I wonder, is a guy like that going to be able to maintain that discipline when he comes up in spots where it's first and second 2 outs and he feels like he's the difference between the Phillies coming through or not?
I think it really depends on his mindset. It really does. I really believe it's in him to hit those 30 home runs or 25 home runs in a season again. I think it's in him. He had some really good swings in spring training. Like you said, his biggest thing is pitch recognition and making sure it's a strike. If he goes back into that, I think he's going to have a hard time getting out of it, because he's going to think back to last year and what he was doing wrong. And then all of a sudden everything kind of snowballs and you can't catch up to it again. He's one of those guys you got to bring the ball up. He's got to make sure the ball is up in the zone and that he can drive the ball. Sometimes that may be attacking earlier in the count. I know he likes to swing at first pitch, but he'll be ahead 1-0 and he might not like a pitch, but it's a hittable pitch and he'll take it. I think attacking early on for him may be a key because he gets in those 1-2, 0-2 counts, and then it's that slider or cutter that starts on the outside part of the plate and goes off the plate that he has a hard time laying off of. He has to be the guy that drives the ball into the gaps and into the seats right now, especially like you said, hitting out of a 4 spot. That's your job. Your job is not necessarily to hit a ground ball single to the right side and hope everything goes well after that. It's not about passing the torch for him. I think it's about taking that torch and running with it. And I think he's the type of guy that could do it. He's just got to make sure that ball's in the zone.
Well, we'll see if the Phillies can turn this around in the final 2 games at Yankee Stadium. If they do, the first portion of the schedule at home does offer them a chance to get back on track. You have the Reds, who are going to probably be one of the worst teams in the National League, project to lose 100 games. You have the Marlins, who have given the Phillies problems in the past, not so much last year. They do have very good pitching, and this guy Luis Ariz, who they got from the Twins in the Pablo Lopez trade, is going to be a pain in the neck all season for the Phillies to deal with. It's like another version of Jeff McNeil, as I keep saying. But
it's unreal. Like the Marlins, to me, always seem to come up with really, really good starting pitching, and no matter what year it is, I could go all the way back to 10 years back. They always had good starting pitching. They just never had those power numbers to kind of back up that starting pitching offensively. But they're always going to be that mosquito that won't go away. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, they have another good one in Edward Cabrera, who came up. And we might also see Sixto Sanchez by midseason. The Marlins haven't had him in a couple of years now because of shoulder problems. Like
two shoulder surgeries, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot to take on. I don't know if you'll ever see the same Sixto Sanchez.
I remember, totally off track, but just when that trade went down, the JT Realmuto trade, it was Alfaro and Sixto Sanchez for JT. And people were split. I would say like 40% of the response was that the Phillies gave up too much. But I think they clearly won the JT Realmuto trade here.
Yeah, they definitely won that trade. I mean, when you look at it, Alfaro's in Worcester now, I believe, in AAA. With the Red Sox, and Sixto's not even pitching right now. So I would say, the Phillies probably got the better end of the stick on that.
And they also did a really good job at the Zach Wheeler signing, which has turned out to be one of the best free agent signings in Phillies history. And they're hoping that this Taijuan Walker signing, can go a similar trajectory where the guy's already been like a number 3 starter. He has the potential to be a little more than that. Very big piece of this team if he can make 30 starts, go 175 plus innings, because we both know these workloads that Wheeler and Nola have carried the last 5 years, they're going to catch up to them eventually. You have to hope it's not this year or next year, but at some point, Nola first in innings since 2018, Wheeler fourth in innings in a game where you just don't see guys go as deep into games as they have. And we saw, late in the playoff run last year, and then this first start they each made this season, room for improvement.
See, the one thing I've been saying that I was concerned about was that long playoff run going until November. And really, it takes a month off of your off-season conditioning. I'm wondering if that has taken its toll a little bit right now on Nola and Wheeler. And you won't here's the thing is they could come into spring training and be fine. They're healthy and everything like that. But does everything feel right? You know what I mean? Sometimes you have that one less month and that will throw players off. You look at baseball players and they're creatures of habit. And when you get off of that training regimen, it could throw pitchers off. And I've been saying that for the last couple months that I'm a little worried on how Nola and Wheeler will kind of get things back together early on in the season. I think it'll be fine in a couple weeks, but it's always getting over that hump. And you're just kind of, I think that's where we are with them right now, waiting for them to get over the hump.
As we are recording this, the Phillies just made a roster move. They optioned Yunior Marte to AAA after his blow-up outing last night. They selected the contract of McKinley Moore, 24-year-old right-handed reliever, high strikeout reliever. They add him to the 40-man roster. They designate Jalen Ortiz for assignment to make room for him. So this gets a fresh arm in the bullpen, another guy who has potentially had an impressive spring training, and the Phillies just needed to get more guys able to give them innings because Marte threw a lot of pitches last night, has struggled in both of his first 2 outings, didn't look like he was an answer, and Rob Thompson's just trying to figure out who to go to in those spots in the middle of the game right now.
Well, it's kind of funny. I saw Marte's last outing in spring training. I believe it was the last day of spring training. He did not look solid at all. He was pulling all of his pitches. I don't know if that's some kind of nerves going into the regular season or whatnot. But, no matter how hard you throw, it simply doesn't matter. If you can't throw the ball over the plate, it's never going to matter. And when your ball flattens out over the plate after walking a couple guys, you're going to get beat up. And I think that's, for him, you have to really stay on top of your pitches, and you really have to stay on top of your mechanics. I thought his mechanics were a little bit out of whack in that last spring training appearance, and I think it's carried over into the regular season. Some time down may do him good. I don't know, but the Phillies like his arm. I know that. And, any moves that are happening right now, that's just to get an arm in here. And I guess Vasquez should be counting his blessings right now that, a lot of guys that pitch 2 or 3 innings, who knows what happens to them in the big leagues nowadays. Sometimes you get sent out, sometimes you get released and it's not your fault. Sometimes it's just what the roster dictates. I have a question for you.
What's up?
Do you think Pache makes it to May? And if he does not, is it Scott Kingery?
Feels 50-50, right? They didn't give up much to get him. It's not like they're going to have major attachment to him if he's 0 for 16 to start, his tenure with the Phillies. And you get past him, Dalton Guthrie, probably the next guy, right? Right-handed option that they talked about.
I guess so, yeah. But I mean, if you got rid of Pache, it wouldn't matter because you would open up a 40-man spot anyways.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, figuring out that center field situation, because they want Brandon Marsh to be able to play against lefties, and that's one of his top goals this year. It's the only thing separating him from being a cemented everyday player and not. But, a career .530 OPS against lefties. Did have that Q shot double down the third baseline last night that then
he didn't exactly crush the ball last night.
No. And then he had that base running blunder where he just picked up the stop sign too late from Dusty Wathan. I'll tell you, though, on that play, just watching it develop from the press box at Yankee Stadium, he got a great jump, Marsh did, right? He got a very good jump. And as he was rounding third base in real time, I can see why he thought he was going to be able to score. Cordero made a strong throw that sailed over. But I'll tell you what, you can attest to this. That's why pitchers are taught to back up the plate. The play that Nestor Cortez made there, backing up the plate and being in position to immediately sidearm it to third base to nab Marsh. I mean, what a fundamental play.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? Those type of plays are simple. All you have to do is throw the ball and go jog somewhere and take a look at what's going on. And that's one thing I always kind of took pride in was I want to be in the play. If something happens, I want to be in the play. So you just get behind where you think the ball's going. And it's one of those situations where even if there's runners on first and second, you put yourself in the middle. And if the play's going home, you have plenty of time to react to go to home plate. And the play's going to third, you have time to go there. But, I mean, in that type of situation, Cortez did the right thing. He got behind home plate, and he was able to get himself involved in the action.
All right, well, let's see how quickly the Phillies can turn this thing around. Bobo, I appreciate you rejoining the Phillies Talk Podcast. We're going to do a couple of these a week every week. So thank you to everybody who's out there listening, and hopefully the next one comes with a little bit better news. Catch you then.